Media recognition from Bloomberg, Reuters, recycling trade publications. Patented process for 100% recovery of critical metals, including cobalt, lithium, nickel, manganese, aluminum. American Manganese is focused on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. American Manganese trades on the TSX Venture, AMY, the US, AMYZF, and Frankfurt 2AM. For more information, visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
Welcome to the Goddard Report. Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Harvey Oberfeld, a retired but still issue-engaged television reporter. Check out his blog, Keeping It Real, on harveyoberfeld.ca. Welcome back to the show, Harvey.
Good to talk to you.
Harvey, what's your take on the results from the federal election? Do we have a split and divided country, or is it just politics as usual?
Well, I don't want to shock anybody, but we've had a split and divided country for many, many decades, even generations. It's a little bit more pronounced now, but I don't think anybody should really worry about the Bloc Québécois, and the rebirth of separatism. That's got the vote for the Bloc Québécois in Quebec had nothing to do with separatism or sovereignty or anything like that, although they will probably try to say, oh, now we have to take another look at it. But the people who voted for them, that was just let's form a gang and we'll go up against Ottawa to see if we can extort as much as we can out of Ottawa on behalf of Quebec. It's a purely economic thing that they did. And it's not anything to do with sovereignty. The real problem, of course, is what's going on in the West. And people in the West have long felt this alienation. But as I wrote in my blog, the Bloc should be careful because our bloc is bigger than their bloc. When you look at the number of seats that the Conservatives captured in the West, especially in Saskatchewan and Alberta, we've got more seats than the Bloc Québécois does that could gang up against Ottawa if they wanted to do that. So the division is really, really quite serious that way, but it's always been that way. The West has always been on the outside looking in, or felt it's on the outside looking in, and now Trudeau and his government have to deal with that.
The fellow who sponsored the billboards in Regina that said vote against Ralph Goodale, the next day said, whoops, now we don't have anybody in cabinet to represent the prairies.
Well, there are ways the government can work on that. There's always people in the Senate, or they can put people into the cabinet. That's it's not so much the bodies that's important. It's the influence. It's whether they're listening to us. And if they're not listening to us, then that's the problem. And I think Trudeau, I think he realizes perhaps more than his father did that he has to start listening to us. And if he doesn't listen to the West, then we are really going to have a seriously divided country with all kinds of problems that could pose. And again, I don't think this Western separatism, that's not realistic. That's not really a problem. And the voting is so watered down here now with new Canadians and that it would never have a chance of passing anyway. So they're not interested in separatism. They don't know anything about that. They are so happy to be in Canada. And even the most Canadians born and bred here have no interest in separatism. We're just mad as hell, and we want to have sort of a more of a say in Ottawa, and we want them to listen to the West more, regardless of our political affiliations.
I was just saying, if you had a separated Alberta and Saskatchewan, how would that help them get a pipeline out to the West Coast if BC said no to a foreign country?
Well, sure, then it would be a foreign country, and then certainly would be one that wouldn't. And what would happen to BC? How could we're going to have a divide? It's going to be like the Gaza Strip or something, where we'll be on the outs with two provinces in between us and the rest of Canada. If that ever came to fruition, and believe me, it will not. I mean, it's really even silly to talk about it. We'd all become parts of the United States, I would think, within a generation. And nobody wants that, I don't think, here, so not too many. So, I don't think it's even serious. The real problem is, that we're going to have a country of blocs. That's the real problem. You'll have the Bloc Québécois in Quebec. You'll have the Western Bloc. It'll be like the rebirth of the old Reform Party, and everybody will be out pushing for themselves, fighting for themselves, and that's not good for a cohesive country. And it's up to the government to start tackling that. And let's see what he can do. Maybe the minority situation will lead Trudeau and his Liberal government to take a serious look at that, more so than if they'd won a majority.
We'll have more with Harvey Oberfeld right after this.
Avon Resources Limited is a gold exploration company with significant projects in British Columbia and the Yukon. Trading on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol ABN, and the OTCQB, symbol ABNAF. Surrounded by world-class gold deposits and mines, Avon's 23,000 hectares Forest Kerr Gold Project is located in the heart of the Golden Triangle in northwestern BC. For more information, visit us at avonresources.com.
Engineer Gold Mines is focused on the exploration and development of the historic high-grade Engineer Gold Mine situated 32 kilometers southwest of Atlin, British Columbia. Engineer Gold Mines is fully permitted for surface and underground exploration with the 2019 drill program now underway. Engineer Gold Mines Limited trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol EAU. For more information, please visit us at engineergoldmines.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Harvey Oberfeld. How serious do you think these Western separatist movements are? They're getting huge numbers on Facebook and Twitter right now, but does that amount to a political movement?
Not in my view. I don't think it's serious at all. It's in fact, it's quite funny. I heard one of them I interviewed on the radio the other day, and he said, we're not really interested in separating, but we think if we make it like we are, they're going to start listening to us. Well, as soon as you say that preamble, no one's going to listen to you. I mean, you basically shot yourself in the foot right from the start. I don't think it's serious at all. I think the Western Canadians are not separatists. We're just mad as hell, and we want to have something done where they'll start listening to us, start not just looking at us as a cash cow to pull money out of, and maybe start delivering to the goods to us and caring about the problems we have. When you take a look at what's going on in Alberta, the economic difficulties Alberta's facing, the impact it's having on the growth of their cities and their society, the unemployment rate, even I've heard, the increase in suicides. I mean, those are very serious problems that have to be dealt with. And I think the Western problems of what's going on in Alberta and to some extent Saskatchewan, I think they're more serious than what's going on in Quebec. I mean, everybody's talking about the Bloc Québécois, but really, Quebec is a spoiled child of Confederation, as I wrote in my blog. It's always been pulled way beyond its weight in terms of power in the cabinet, power in government agencies, power in the bureaucracy, power in policy. And Quebec is the last province, I would think, that has any legitimate reason to complain. In fact, if you analyze Canada and the way it operates, but the one province that doesn't say very much, but really doesn't get its full share of anything, is Ontario. Ontario does more giving than it does getting, in the whole national setup. And they don't bellyache and complain as much as Quebec does. And yet everybody's worried, well, what about the Bloc? The Bloc, what happened with the Bloc? It's like a bunch of angry teenagers forming a gang, thinking, well, if we form a gang and we sort of threaten and all this our neighbors, they're going to be so intimidated by us, they're going to give us what we want. And the worst thing Trudeau could do is to cater to that, because if he caters to that, that'll just be the beginning, because they'll learn, oh, this works. So if Trudeau were smart in handling the Bloc Québécois and what's happening in Quebec, he'd do what they do in the Maritimes when one party takes over. They don't spend any money in the ridings that voted the other way, and even the bureaucracy changes used to, to a great extent. And if Trudeau did that, if he sort of dried up the money going to Bloc ridings, that would send a better message than catering to them, and then start rewarding the ridings that did vote in favor of any of the other traditional parties, especially, I guess, with a Liberal government, those that voted Liberal. I mean, that's the tradition. But if he starts catering to the Bloc to sort of, convince them, oh no, this is good for Canada, that's the worst message you could send to them.
Well, Stephen Harper was pretty vindictive against ridings that didn't vote his way. He closed the busiest Coast Guard base in Canada, Kitsilano, because it was in a Liberal riding.
Well, I don't know if that's the reason he closed it, but that certainly didn't. How did that serve as purposes in the end? You know, I mean, that was that wasn't a winning strategy. You know, and I think Trudeau. I know, you know, a lot of people disagree with a lot of his policies and certainly the scandals that he was involved in. But I think he's smart enough, or the people around him are smart enough to realize that what's going on in the West is probably in the long term more of a serious problem than the election of Bloc Québécois in Quebec. I think that what's going on in the West is much more serious from a long-term plan, and I think if they're smart, that's what they'll concentrate on, because Quebec will smoke and stamp its feet and you know, throw tantrums. But in the end, I think most of them realize that they've got a better deal in Canada than they would outside.
What can Trudeau do to win over the people who voted Conservative on the prairies?
Well, how about if he started listening to them? How about if he started, you know, not just saying, oh, you know, I really am concerned about this. You know, maybe he shouldn't make so many remarks about, you know, all he wants is the Trans-Canada pipeline. But what about the other pipelines that were talked about? Why did he just rule those out? If they can deal with the environmental requirements and the standards, and you know, why shouldn't they have a chance at proceeding? I mean, that's our bread and butter in Alberta, and for Canada, much of Canada, you know, Canada shares in the spoils when Alberta is healthy. And also, what about the West Coast tanker ban? I mean, what a foolish thing that was, that to say, well, there can't be any tankers anywhere under any circumstances on the West Coast. Well, you don't win friends and influence by doing that. I mean, I think he's got to wake up and start realizing that you can't, on one hand, say you care about the West and say you care about Alberta, but then, you know, every policy you come up with puts a pressure on them and taxes on them and restricts their growth and their economy. You just can't work that way and expect them to vote Liberal.
Alberta clearly is in a recession, yet Ottawa takes billions of dollars from Alberta and gives it to Quebec. Can that continue?
Well, the equalization payments, you know, that's long been used by Quebec, you know, in a way that a lot of people out here don't understand. Quebec has some of the greatest social programs that you can imagine. You know, daycare that we would only dream of, housing and environmental programs. Quebec does very, very well. And part of the reason they could do so well with their social programs is that they get subsidized to the point of billions of dollars that come from the West. They come from Alberta. And I think the whole equalization formula has to be looked at. I don't mind, you know, I don't think most Westerners would mind helping some of the poorer provinces. But when you have a province like Quebec, you know, I mean, we could sort of help the Maritimes out that need it. But when you have a province like Quebec that is enjoying so many billions of dollars coming from Alberta and the West in equalization grants, and then has the gall to turn around and say, but we don't want any of your oil coming through here on pipeline. We don't want to do anything that will assist your economy, because all we care about is ourselves. And they very clearly say that. All we care about is ourselves. Well, what kind of a national country can you build with that kind of attitude, and at the same time reward them with billions of dollars pulled out of the West? I don't understand how anybody would expect that to mollify people out in Western Canada. And I think Trudeau, if he has any smarts for the long term, that's what he should tackle. Because a lot of the people who voted Bloc, they'll vote Bloc next time anyway. They can't stand the Liberals, they can't stand Trudeau. But there is potential for Trudeau to make some gains. You know, he didn't do too badly in the West in 2015, and if he ever wants a majority government again, he better deal with what's going on in the West and not worry so much about what's going on in Quebec.
We'll have more with Harvey Oberfeld right after this.
Cypress Development Corp. is developing a world-class lithium resource in the heart of Clayton Valley, Nevada. The size of the resource makes the Clayton Valley project a premier asset with the potential to impact the future of lithium supply. Cypress Development Corp. trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol CYP, the OTCQB, symbol CYDVF, and on Frankfurt, symbol C1Z1. For more information, please visit our website, cypressdevelopmentcorp.com.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Harvey Oberfeld. Harvey, the Conservatives won the popular vote. Is it time for Canada to change the way the elections are held, or does the referendum in BC about changing the election system tell us everything that Canadians feel about they like the old system?
Well, you know, the Trudeau had promised to change the electoral system. Now, I'm not a great fan of proportional representation. From the point of view, I used to think it would be a good idea, because it is a shame that, people can get 1 million votes and have no representation in Parliament. There is a problem with that. I acknowledge that. But when I look at some of the countries around the world where you have small parties, like in Italy, look what's going on in Israel right now. When you have so many small parties that can get elected with, just a few percent, and they have a few seats, whatever, it's chaos. It's absolute chaos, and nobody can ever form a government, without doing all kinds of deals, sometimes with some pretty unsavory characters. But you do it for the sake of achieving power. So I'm not a great fan of proportional representation. I wouldn't mind seeing an elected Senate where you could have some balance. Where you could have regional representation, on another basis that would help other parts of the country have better representation than they do now under the current system. But the popular vote is interesting. When you add up what the Conservatives got, they 6.1 million. And then the Liberals got 5.8. But when you add in the NDP and the Greens, that brings up the Liberal NDP Green group to 9.9 million votes. So there is influence, and the way it's best achieved now in Canada seems to be with a minority government. Some of our best governments have been minority governments over the last few decades, and they've accomplished quite a lot. What it does, it moderates the majority. We all remember, look how arrogant Harper became when he was in power, especially as the longer he was in power, the more arrogant he got, the more he cut off, he wouldn't even hold press conferences. Even during the campaign, he didn't want to take questions. He ordered bureaucrats not to talk to the media. I remember that, and they really became very, very arrogant. And that's what happens with majority governments when they've been in so long. Every party, it's not just the Liberals would be the same, and that's what happens. But if you have a minority government that requires at least some support from some of the other parties, that actually seems to moderate them quite a lot. So I'm not a great, I'm a bit of a believer in minority governments. I actually like minority governments to some extent. But I don't think proportional representation would solve any problems. I think it would just give us a new set of different problems.
An election every 6 months like Italy.
Well, I don't know if we'd go that bad, but look at Israel. They may have their third election in a year. They're still mulling that over in Israel right now, and who knows with how many parties do they have there? It's just amazing. So I don't think that's the way to go. Although Israel doesn't have a proportional representation thing, it just has fracturing and fragmenting that's taken place. But I just don't see these little parties having a few seats. They become blackmailers, if they want to be, and I don't like that idea either.
Maxime Bernier lost his seat in Quebec. Is the People's Party of Canada dead?
I wouldn't even say it's on life support right now. It's an idea, that could have some traction if it had, perhaps a better spokesman. I think I actually, on my blog, I actually campaigned for him to be included in the debate. But when I saw him performing in that debate, I thought, well, maybe I messed that one up. If I had any influence at all, because I didn't think he performed very well, and some of the comments he made, both during the debate and during the campaign, I think probably did the party in. But you never know. If you went on the line and you looked at their policies, I bet you there's a lot of things in there that a lot of Canadians would actually agree with. I actually went to their website, and there were a lot of things in there that had sort of, Yeah, I could see what his point is there, and I could see this and that. I think with a better spokesman and a more moderate sort of face to the party, and maybe cutting loose some of the extremists on the periphery, I think that party could have some sort of a future, but it's nothing that the Conservative Party has to worry about right now.
I was going to say, can Andrew Scheer survive as leader? Everybody said this was his chance to win with Trudeau making so many mistakes.
He has a big problem. Scheer is in trouble because when you think, and it's not so much what he's done, but when you think of what Trudeau had done, when you think of Trudeau with his blackface, with the going to the Aga Khan's private island, with the Ethics Commission, what he did to Jody Wilson-Raybould, when you think of all the scandals, all the terrible mistakes, the SNC-Lavalin, if you couldn't defeat him then you really have some problems, because he was pretty ripe for defeat. I thought he could, and I even, people who read my blog wrote that I have to be in the riding of Vancouver Granville, and I was voting for Jody Wilson-Raybould just because I liked the way she stood up to Trudeau on the question of principles and ethics. And anybody knows me knows that's very important to me. And I actually did not support Trudeau specifically because I just couldn't do it. I just felt, no, that's not for me. But if Scheer couldn't beat him, that makes you wonder, well, what would it take? Because let's assume that Trudeau learned something from this campaign, and his past is now really past. So, unless he's really stupid and does more ethical breaches and that sort of thing, I think Andrew Scheer against him next time would have just as stiff a problem, because he probably wouldn't have as many vulnerabilities that he could expose about Trudeau. So, unless people get tired of Trudeau, and that happens with people after they've been in power for a while, that's a possibility. But I would think that the Conservatives might want to take a look and see, well, who else do we have in the wings that could possibly, challenge Trudeau? And, I'm sure there are maybe some of the candidates who lost in the last election might even take a look at it, like Raitt in Ontario. I mean, a lot of people say she could probably take on Trudeau, maybe better than Scheer could. So Scheer's got to look over his shoulder, and I'm sure there's people right now in the party trying to assess, well, if Scheer couldn't beat Trudeau this time, how could he possibly beat Trudeau next time?
Did Doug Ford kill the Conservatives in Ontario with his policies?
I think there was a little lashback. I think Doug Ford in Ontario hurt them in the 905 area. I think there's a lot of people there that would possibly have been willing to go for the Conservatives. Not that strongly liberal, especially with Trudeau's scandals and Trudeau's breach of ethics and slight arrogance, it seemed, in that. I think the 905 was ripe for the pickings, at least some of the seats there, and the fact that they did so poorly, I think some of that was just a backlash to Ford's cuts. Sort of, we'll send a lesson, and what better way to send a lesson than to defeat the Conservatives here in our riding, vote Liberal, and rub it in Ford's face. So I think that happened. I don't think it's anything that Scheer could take the blame for, but he paid the price.
Harvey, thank you so much for chatting with us.
You're welcome.
My guest has been Harvey Oberfeld. You can find his blog, Keeping It Real, on harveyoberfeld.ca. If you have any questions for our guests, you can send them to info@howstreet.com. I'm Jim Goddard. Thank you for listening.
Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. The Goddard Report is available online and mobile at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. The Goddard Report is a production of Howe Street Media Incorporated.